This video was brought to you by Nanlite. Being able to adjust your tint from a dial is a filmmaking luxury made possible only by modern LEDs. The ability to sway your light's color to its green or magenta on demand is no longer an uncommon feature to have on lights these days, so chances are you might already own an LED light which offers green magenta tint correction. And just in case you feel you might have been underutilizing this feature on your lights, here are 5 ways this feature could come in incredibly handy. The first is the most straightforward, and that's accuracy, the ability to self-correct on the light's behalf. In case the light is not outputting an accurate neutral white, we would typically get some help from a color meter to nudge the tint back towards neutral. And most of the time, it's not that these lights aren't properly calibrated when they leave the factory, it's just how LEDs tend to have their white points drift a bit as they age. So when you have this built-in ability to compensate for that, it indirectly contributes to the longevity of these lights because you can negate their effects as opposed to just living with it. This self-correction could also be useful for compensating shifts in tint caused by bouncing or shooting your light through diffusion or tinted glass. It used to be the case that only full-color LED fixtures had the ability to adjust tint in white light or CCT mode. On bicolor-only fixtures, it simply was not a thing. But today, that statement comes with some exceptions. There are fixtures, like the second-generation Forza 300B and 500B lights from Nanlite, which are bicolor fixtures, but are equipped with green magenta correction abilities. And that gives these a distinct advantage over other bicolor fixtures, especially when you're mixing different brands or even different types of lights on set. Because when you have the ability to adjust both color temperature and tint, these become the more versatile lights, which can then be matched to the less versatile ones. With tungstens, fluorescents, or HMIs, the traditional way to make tint adjustments would be to use these plus green or minus green gels. Now, although these gels are available in different densities, they are still nowhere near as granular in terms of precision and nowhere near as fast as turning a dial on an LED. And aside from matching other artificial light sources, the green magenta adjustments are also useful for matching environmental light. Oftentimes we light a scene by adding our lights upon lights which already exist. This could be natural light coming from a window or house lights at a location. It might sound a bit counterintuitive to say match our accurate filmmaking lights to the less accurate house lights, but doing so would actually allow us to apply a blanket correction in post, so there's a less jarring difference in tint between our added light and the light that's already in the scene. Up until this point, all the use cases we've gone through have been very much centered around matching colors. But now we're going to take it in the opposite direction, and that is to make use of this adjustability to create contrast. In a sense, you can almost think of it as using an RGB light, but to a much more subtle extent. We're still keeping our lights within the spectrum of white, and the idea is to light the subject and the background separately. When we shift the tint of the subject and the background in opposite directions, it increases contrast in terms of color. If I'm lighting a human subject, I would typically alter only the color of the background light so I don't mess with the skin tones. But in case I do, that's our tip number 5. The ability to shift your tint is actually really useful for boosting skin tones. Human skin reflects more light within the red area of the spectrum, so one thing I like to do in case I'm seeing skin tones which look a bit pale on camera is to dial up the magenta on my talent's key light, and that would redden up those skin tones, making my talent look a bit more lively. A subtle adjustment is typically more than enough for this use case. The more extreme adjustments I would typically reserve for times when I'm really intentionally trying to use color to convey a certain emotion. An example would be using a color temperature of around 2700 Kelvin with a fair amount of magenta in it to create this warm, welcoming feeling. The greener tones, on the other hand, would usually be used to convey a more grungy aesthetic. So the simple ability to tweak the tint on a light could really be useful in more ways than just one. It is absolutely one of the biggest perks brought about by modern lighting technology, and I believe it is in the process of transitioning from being somewhat of a luxury feature to standard equipment in the very near future. I guess we'll find out in time, and until then, I'll see you around.